Vice Chair Williams, are we about ready? It's 6 o'clock. You can go ahead and get started.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, welcome everybody to the Planning Commission meeting of March 22nd, 2022. At this time, I would like to take a minute to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to take a roll call now. Can the Planning Secretary please do a roll call?
Yes. Vice Chair Williams?
Present.
Commissioner Ebnetter?
Present.
Commissioner Nugent?
Present.
Commissioner Patel?
Here. Thank you. Okay, as usual, I'll do a reminder that due to the physical distancing protocols in place at this time, we continue to encourage public participation remotely. Information on how to provide public comment is explained at the bottom of the published agenda, and there are two ways to participate. Join the Zoom meeting by clicking on the link at the top of the agenda and use the raise your hand button to be called on at the appropriate time. Phone-in participation can be done by calling area code 408-638-0968 with the conference ID number, meeting ID 819-1830-3270 and the passcode of 738538. When the item of interest is open for consideration, press star 9 to raise your hand and to be called upon. When called upon, press star 6 to unmute, state your name, and provide your comments. These options for public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for this specific item. And I think, as I understand it, their general public comment will be done at the after this meeting. Is that correct, Mary? I'm not sure if I have that right. Or are we doing general public comment?
This is Gabrielle, and public comment can occur at any time during the course of the meeting. So okay. I don't see it on the agenda. So it's up to the commission as to whether they'd rather have public, and public comment is limited to what this agenda topic is, which is the indoor tennis court. And so the commission can decide if they'd like to hear the public comment, when they'd like to hear it during the course of this presentation.
Right. So what I meant was we're not doing public comment period at this time for items that are not on the agenda.
That's correct.
Okay. So we're going to move directly into the study session for item number 1. Mary, would you introduce the item, please?
Yes. Item number 1, pre-application review for a proposed 2-story private indoor tennis court at 2164 Palm Avenue, PA 2021-062.
Great, thank you. So is staff ready to do a presentation?
I am. Thank you, Vice Chair Williams. Good evening. Before I begin, just want to confirm 2 things. 1, that you can hear me, and 2, that you can see my presentation.
Yes, to both.
Excellent. Thank you. So good evening, Vice Chair Williams and members of the Commission. My name is Laura Richstone, and I am an Associate Planner with the Community Development Department, here to provide a staff presentation for the 2164 Palm Avenue private tennis court pre-application. Staff will ultimately be seeking feedback on the proposed use and the design of the structure. So the project is a vacant site It's a vacant parking lot located at 2164 Palm Avenue between 20th and 25th Avenues. It's approximately 14,990 square feet in size and zoned C4, which is service commercial. It fronts Palm Avenue and has a roughly rectangular shape as well. Parcels to the north, south, and east, pictured in pink here, are also zoned service commercial C4 and consist of a mixture of automotive repair, warehouse, small-scale manufacturing, and other compatible community-serving uses. Parcels to the west, highlighted in orange, front El Camino and are zoned C31/R4, which is regional community commercial with a residential overlay. And these parcels consist of various retail uses such as a coffee shop, a violin store, a flooring and carpet store, and a inn to the north. The applicant has proposed to provide, or has proposed a private indoor tennis court for the personal use of the property owner and invited guests. The proposed two-story building would consist of a tennis court, backboard warm-up area, turf area, lobby, and restroom on the first floor. And then on the second floors would be a second restroom, mechanical and storage areas, and a clubhouse for post-tennis activities. 3 off-street parking spaces are also proposed in a surface parking lot located at the front of the building. Codes and policies that will be applicable to this project include the general plan, zoning code, and bicycle and pedestrian master plans as seen below. The project would require a special use permit for the proposed personal recreational facility and a site plan and architectural review, a SPAR permit, for the new structure and site improvements. As currently proposed, the conceptual project may pose conformance issues with parking regulations, the pedestrian and bicycle master plans, and the intent of the service commercial C4 district. A comprehensive evaluation of the project's conformance with these codes and policies will be completed during review of the formal planning application. The general plan identifies the project site as a service commercial, which is intended to provide a broad range and mix of commercial manufacturing and vital community services that are of city or regional wide importance and that are not typically found in shopping centers or other commercial areas within the city. Service commercial areas are concentrated along Palm Avenue, Amflet Boulevard, and Railroad Avenue. And these areas comprise less than 1% of all commercially zoned land within the city. General Plan Land Use Policy 1.13 specifically speaks to the promotion and retention of the service commercial area and businesses in these areas by prohibiting residential uses within these districts. And one overarching question the Planning Commission may want to consider as we go through this presentation and they provide feedback is whether or is if the proposed use of a private non-commercial recreational facility meets the intent and goals of the general plan service commercial district. So as mentioned, the site is zoned C4, which is service commercial, which implements the goals and of the general plan that we just discussed on the previous slide. The zoning encourages the continuation of the commercial uses, small manufacturing and community services talked about in the general plan. As outlined in the chart to the left, the conceptual building meets the FAR setback and height standards of the C4 district. Regarding parking, there is a potential conflict with the configuration of the parking lot related to backup space and the number of spaces provided. Currently, 3 off-street parking spaces are proposed at the front of the structure and a surface parking lot. For the purposes of calculating required parking, the tennis facility is required to provide 3 spaces per court and then spaces for the additional uses on site. Additional uses for this project include the turf area, warm-up, backup area, and clubhouse areas, which all combined would require 25 additional parking spaces per our parking schedule. But as the project is not intended to be used by the public or for commercial recreation, the applicant has elected to perform a site-specific parking study to determine if the additional uses on site would generate the need for 25 parking spaces. So the site plan and parking lot configuration may shift pending the results on this of the parking study. The project also includes sidewalk improvements to be consistent with the recommendations of and the standards of the citywide pedestrian master plan. The citywide master plan includes standards for a 14-foot sidewalk width, which consists of a buffer area between the sidewalk and the front of the property, a sidewalk through zone, which is where you typically walk, and then a planter and furniture zones as well. The existing sidewalk along Palm Avenue in front of the property is approximately 9 to 10 feet wide, and the applicant has proposed a 13-foot, 6-inch sidewalk that will encroach about 4 feet into the right-of-way to meet the recommendations of the sidewalk master plan. This may result in a potential conflict with a planned bicycle route along Palm Avenue envisioned in the bicycle master plan. Options such as pushing a portion of the proposed sidewalk improvements onto the project parcel, reconfiguring the parking lot, or reducing the width of the sidewalk may be ways to avoid conflicts with the master plan and meet the intent of the pedestrian master plan as well. Staff expects that the applicant will further develop their site plan and sidewalk design for greater consistency with these master plans during the formal application stage. Staff ultimately has 3 main items that we would like the Planning Commission to consider and provide feedback on at this time. And as we go through these items on the next few slides, staff suggests that the Planning Commission consider if the proposed use is compatible with the district and meets the intent of the general plan, if the scale is appropriate for the project site, and if the overall industrial architectural style of the building design, and the proposed materials are compatible with each other and within the context of the neighborhood. The first area that staff would like feedback on is the proposed use of the site. As outlined in the municipal code, all uses allowed in the C1, C2, and C3 districts are also allowed in the C4 service commercial district as well. Similarly, any special uses allowed in the C1, C2, and C3 districts are also permitted with a special use permit and SUP in the C4 district. Commercial recreation, which includes tennis courts and facilities, are a special use that's allowed within the C2 district and thus allowed in the C4 district with the issuance of a special use permit. The C2 district, and by extension the C4 district, also allows other non-designated uses with the issuance of an SUP. Since the proposed project is a private tennis court for the personal use of the property owner and does not contain a commercial component, staff is seeking early feedback and input from the Planning Commission on whether the proposed use would be compatible with the C4 service commercial district. When approving a use permit, a special use permit for a non-designated use, which is what this would be, the Planning Commission would have to find that the use is so similar to a listed designated use that it would be virtually identical in terms of impact and land use requirements to a listed use, and that the use would not adversely affect or the general health or welfare of the community. Questions the Commission may want to consider as they evaluate the proposed use and provide feedback include: does the use meet the intent of the general plan and service commercial zoning district? Could the use be considered a compatible district use? And does the Planning Commission have any preliminary concerns related to the special use permit findings. In addition to a special use permit, the project would also require a site plan and architectural review, SPAR permit, for the proposed building and site improvements. To approve a SPAR, the Planning Commission must find, among other things, that the structure, site plan, and any proposed landscaping are in scale and harmonious with the neighborhood, and that the development meets all applicable standards and conforms with the general plan. So the second large discussion item staff would like feedback on is the building site plan for this project. As seen here, the site plan, as seen in the site plan here, the proposed building occupies most of the parcel with 3 surface parking spaces located in a parking lot at the front of the structure. The proposed clay tennis court is located in the rear of the structure and comprises most of the building. A turf area, lobby, restroom, and tennis backboard warm-up area are located on the first floor in front of the tennis court. The second floor of the structure does not extend over the tennis court area in the rear, and that second floor houses a second restroom, mechanical and storage areas, and a clubhouse for post-tennis activities. And then, as I touched upon earlier, there's also a 3-car surface parking lot at the front of the building here. Pending the results of the site-specific parking study, as we discussed, additional parking spaces may be required. But zooming into the parking lot, the current conceptual configuration of this parking lot does not meet standards. It doesn't meet backup standards, and it has been identified that the parking lot will need to be reconfigured upon formal planning application submittal. And this has been communicated to the applicant. In addition to the parking lot, the applicant has also proposed, as I touched upon earlier, to expand 4 feet into the right-of-way to achieve greater consistency with the city's pedestrian master plan. So the red dotted line marks the approximate location of the existing edge of the sidewalk, and they're expanding about 4 feet into the roadway. So as mentioned, the expansion of the sidewalk into the right-of-way would present a conflict with the city's bicycle master plan, which anticipates a bike lane along Palm Avenue in the future. And as I mentioned, the applicant has been made aware of these potential conflicts. So options such as potentially reducing the width of the sidewalk or pushing a portion of the sidewalk improvements onto the project parcel could potentially accommodate both the sidewalk width requirements outlined in the pedestrian master plan and the bicycle lane along Palm Avenue that's anticipated for the future. However, these options may require a reconfiguration of the property and or further constrain or cause the elimination of on-site parking lot. So a reduction in the building footprint or a whole reconfiguration of the site plan may be required to meet the goals of the master plans and provide adequate on-site parking as required. So at this time, staff request that the Planning Commission provide initial input and feedback on the overall conceptual building site plan, including the proposed sidewalk improvements and configuration of the parking lot. Questions the Planning Commission may want to consider while evaluating the site plan include, does the building footprint and parking lot allow for sidewalk improvements that meets these master plans? Does the parking lot provide adequate parking and circulation in terms of usability and configuration? And if there are there any design modifications that are suggested at this time? Oh, pardon me. The third big item that staff would like input on is the conceptual design of the building. The overall architectural style of the proposed building is best characterized as industrial based on the building's rectangular massing and use of red brick veneer. along the front and portions of the side of the building. Cement board cladding is also proposed along the sides of the building, as well as a steel canopy and aluminum clad windows along the front. Instead of articulating the building walls of the structure, the illusion of articulation for this project is created by a change in roof forms, with a flat roof located at the front of the building, and then an arched roof assembly pictured above, located at the rear of the structure above the tennis court area. And this arch roof assembly would be located approximately 50 feet back from the front property line and would be visible from the street, as you can see in the front elevation. Elevations of adjacent structures have also been included here to provide an approximate context for the scale of the conceptual building design as it relates to the adjacent properties. So at this time, staff requests that the Planning Commission provide feedback on the overall architectural style and massing of the building, and questions that the Commission may want to consider while providing this feedback include whether the project is compatible with the neighborhood in terms of scale and building design, if there are any suggested modifications to increase the compatibility of the neighborhood, would the project benefit from a third party, and would the project benefit from a third party design review during the formal application phase. A neighborhood meeting for this project was held on the 28th of February, and there were 3 public attendees. No public comments were received during the meeting itself, but 2 comments were submitted after the neighborhood meeting, which I believe were included in the packet and or forwarded to the Commission. Concerns raised in these letters, public comment letters, centered around the current upkeep of the property, the lack of adequate parking, and a sense that the use looked more commercial than private. So as the Commission provides feedback on this project, the Commission may want to consider regarding the use, whether the use of the property meets the intent of the general plan and zoning district, if the non-commercial recreational use could be considered a compatible use, and if the Commission may have any preliminary concerns regarding the findings necessary for issuing a proposed non-designated use, including the finding that the use would be virtually identical in terms of impact and land use requirements to a designated use. Guiding questions related to the conceptual building design and site plan, just as a recap, include does the footprint, site plan, and site improvements meet the goals of the pedestrian and master plans? If there are any concerns related to on-site parking and circulation of the parking lot, if the architectural design and materials proposed are compatible with the neighborhood, and if any other suggestions or modifications are proposed at this time or suggested by the Planning Commission at this time. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your time. I will be available for any questions that you may have. The applicant and the owner, I believe, are also present tonight and may want to provide a few short words, and are also present for any questions as well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask the planning commissioners if they have any questions on that presentation that they need like clarification on at this time. No for John, no for Seema. Adam, do you have questions for clarification?
I do, yeah. Thank you, Vice Chair. The question I have is how, I guess, the semantics of calling this not commercial use, but for private use only. By designating this as not commercial, does that mean it's not open to public either through, payment of some sort of fee to use or just being free to the public, and that it can only be accessed by the owner itself?
Yes, and the owner can provide more feedback, but staff's understanding is that the facility would be for the use of the private owner and any invited guests. It would not be used in a club format or open to the public, so it would be very much private and limited to those few individuals.
Okay. And so as far as relating the difference between the commercial use that would be, that is consistent or consistent with a special use permit, and this private personal use, is there anything that stands out to staff that we should consider that would make that different from a commercial recreation facility?
The main difference is the economic benefit that the project may or may not provide in the city, or to the city, I should say. And just the consideration that these service commercial areas are very much intended to provide that economic generation for the city and provide new jobs for the city, for a diverse job fabric. So those are the main considerations that I have identified.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair, if I may add to that, Manira Sandhir, Planning Manager. So one of the other considerations, Commissioner Nugent, is that the private use as a tennis facility almost acts like a residential accessory use because it is for a private resident.
Okay, thank you. You're a little quiet. Can you maybe get your microphone a little closer?
Sorry, I'm on a different laptop today. Did you hear me, or should I repeat?
I heard you, but it might be, yeah.
It would be helpful to just repeat because I kind of lost the end of it.
Yes, absolutely, Vice Chair Williams. So the use would function almost as a residential accessory use because it is for a private homeowner.
And then
okay,
I would just add, if I may, that one of the things we're looking at, as Laura mentioned, is the parking for the proposed use. And so if it were to end up with the 3 parking spaces that are proposed for this private tennis court, we would have to think about how that parking would work in the future if this building were to change hands and were to come under a different land use in the future. And if someone did want to operate a service commercial use there at some time down the road, how that would function in the neighborhood. So I would say that this would be a lesser parking impact, but the site plan would account for that for only this use.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other clarifying questions? Okay. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this project? Mary, are you there?
Hi there. I'm sorry, you wanted public commenters?
Yeah, I think that we don't have any other questions at this time from the planning commissioners. So now we can open it up for public comment if there are any members of the public.
So yeah, we actually do have one public commenter. Drew, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, good evening, commissioners, staff, and applicant. So I wasn't able to attend the community meeting, just was double booked. I would have liked to. And so a couple thoughts. First, I don't inherently have a problem with the lots vacant. Tennis court's better than a vacant lot kind of thing. So no big issue that it's a private tennis court type of thing as such. That's fine. When I looked at the plans online, I may have just not understood them, but it seemed like there was a fair bit of open space behind the building to the alleyway kind of area. And so that leads in part to my next comment about the sidewalk configuration. I'm strongly against building out the sidewalk into the current pavement right away. Right now it's a parking spaces. And I know in time that could be converted into the bike lane type situation or it's protected bike lane because there's no there's space. But just inherently that if anything, the sidewalk should be giving more space for those kind of things. So I would cut out the landscaping buffer area if that's the problem, because I have biked along that and I have walked along there, and losing a couple parking spots is also not good until the bike lane type stuff happens. So that's the one thing because it looked like there was room in the back, it's just slide the whole project back. But I again may totally be misreading the plot map and the plans. But I definitely am strongly against the sidewalk going into the roadway for current use and for future use. So that's my one thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak?
Vice Chair Williams, I don't see any other public commenters at this time.
Okay. So at this time, we shall open it up to comments from the planning commissioners. And I don't know if it might be helpful to have, I'm not sure if there was a consolidated slide with the areas of discussion and comments and questions, but
Yes, I will pull those up.
there
And
was, I
the
think at the
chair,
end that was consolidated.
Vice Chair Williams, I just wanted to recommend if you want to open it up to the applicant as well, in case they would like to speak, they are here as well.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. Yes, would the applicant, either the architect or the owner, like to make a presentation or say anything about the project to us?
Yes, I'm the owner. I'm Nick. It's very nice to meet everybody. And I do have a little presentation that I'd like to present. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, you should be able to do that.
Okay.
If you are,
Can
do you have the, oh, great.
Okay. So okay, great. So I just want to give a little background and inspiration for this project. I was born in Paris, but I've lived in the Bay Area since 1987. My dream ever since I was a child growing up in Paris has been to play on red clay, which unfortunately doesn't exist in Florida. You only find it in Europe. My vision is to build, a cathedral-like tennis court, like the one pictured here. This is of the French Open Stadium court. As you can probably imagine, I'm very passionate about tennis. Some might say obsessed. I won't talk too much more about my tennis background, but in any case, I'm spending my life savings on this, and there's no investors. It's difficult for tennis court to be profitable given the cost of land and building costs here in the Bay Area. And this tennis court that I'm proposing takes up about 70% of the entire parcel space. So this is really all about tennis. So this project is not typical, which is why I'm requesting a special use permit. And we talked about it a little bit, but earlier, but a personal tennis court is really identical to a commercial tennis court. The only real difference is the amount of usage. But that said, you can only fit 4 people on a court at a given time. And coincidentally, there used to be an indoor tennis center across the street on South Delaware named the Sundown Tennis Club, which existed for, I think, 40 plus years. It's now, it's now a public storage. And, by using, high quality materials, landscaping design, I really believe that this project will help beautify the area and increase property values. Interestingly, red clay, the red clay used for the surface of the tennis court is made out of bricks, hence the inspiration for a brick building. And also these mature trees that you see is also very common in Paris and France. So this is why I'm trying to tie all that in. So unfortunately, this project has stalled due to parking concerns. Bottom line, if I have to add 28 spots, there's obviously no room left for a tennis court, much less anything else. So I'm really just trying to get this cleared out once and for all. I did, just, in May of 2021, before I purchased this lot, which was vacant and used just to store, heavy equipment. I did as much due diligence as I could. And at the time, I was told by the city that 2 parking stalls is what was required for a sports court. And then in 2020, in August, I introduced my architect, and the zoning manager had also confirmed that 2 spots was what I was required for a sports court. So, and then in November of last year, after parking concerns were now being raised, we commissioned a parking study that concluded that 2.6 stalls was what was actually required for my intended use. And if parking is an issue, I'm certainly willing to sign a limitation of use agreement with the city, limiting the number of people that can visit the site. I also want to stress that the ancillary spaces in the plans are for tennis activities only. I will never use it as a health club or spa. It's not what it's intended for. One of those spaces, as you can see here, is a tennis back wall, which I'm using for warm up, practice, and training. And then the other space is a turf area, which I can use also for warm up, agility, training, and stretching. And it's pretty common for tennis courts to have, these sorts of things. And finally, George, my architect, he'll talk about parking in general in ways, that we can add more spaces to alleviate, any future concerns that the city may have. So that's my spiel, and thank you for listening.
Okay. Sure, absolutely. I actually just wanted to make one comment because Drew, who spoke from the public, was I think made the same mistake that I did. I originally, when looking at the plans, thought there was a lot more to the site at the rear of the building, but that is the next property. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there in case anyone else. Originally I was thinking, why is there all this space at the back of the building? But then I realized the property line went right across the back of the building. I don't know if it's a 0 lot line, but it was very close. So, okay, well, great. Thank you so much for your presentation and the information. Are there any other questions at this point before we kind of get started on our comments?
Actually, I know I'm just the architect, but I think Nick wanted me to say a few words about the building, and I know we're running out of time, so I'll try to speak as fast as I can. One thing Nick did not mention, my name's George Myers. I'm a partner at Swap Myers Architects. One thing that Nick did not mention is that he has met with every single landowner around the building along Palm Avenue, and I believe you have letters, several letters in your packet of support for the project. Everyone he met with was supportive of it. He's reached out, and I think, really made an effort to find out if there were any comments and other, issues that we should take into concern. I also want to throw out that the applicant has no problem having nonprofit tennis lessons or any number of things here. None of this is for profit, but obviously he does not want to, have that result in dedicated uses that then require, additional, parking or other kind of requirements. So we're very open to talking about other kinds of nonprofit uses, handicapped children and tennis facilities. I think there's a wide range of really wonderful programs that can be done here, but we could talk about that later. Okay, so Laura has obviously outlined the project. It's a somewhat narrow site and long site. I do want to point out the overall width of this site is 72 feet. That's important for this reason. Ideally, for championship tennis, you actually want 72 feet, at least 72 feet. You have 36 feet wide for the court and 18 feet on each side. We're actually not able to achieve ideally what Nick would have wanted, because obviously we have to put the walls and structure on the side. So we're losing about 4 feet in that direction. Stephen, can you go to the next slide? We've pushed the building, again, I'm going to try to speak quickly here. We've pushed the building plan back to the very far corner. And again, the overall length that we would have ideally liked to have had for a championship court is 132 feet, and we've reduced it to 126 feet. Nick is fine with that, but I thought those dimensions were important. There's 2 other components on the ground floor. There's the this 2-story backboard warm-up area that Laura mentioned, and then there's this turf area. And then there's a small lobby to get into the building. Outside the door to the tennis structure is a bathroom. We have to have 2 means of egress out of this space, even though there's 4 people, but just given the nature of it. And obviously we can't exit out of the back of the building because we're in a mid-block property line. So there are some interesting site constraints to the building. Can you reduce this a little bit, Stephen? I put some photos up of a tennis facility we did in Burlingame. You may have driven by it. It's a very different kind of project. This was a commercial project. It was done by a couple who taught at Stanford, now purchased by the Bay Club. But what it does illustrate is the type of space we're creating in the tennis structure, which is a fabric-lined structure, arch steel frame, that just lets a lot of natural light in without letting any UV light in. Obviously, we're only one tennis structure, but I thought it'd be useful for you to sort of get a glimpse of, the type of structure that is. And the company we're using to build this is the same. They're called Fabric Texture. They're an internationally known company. They do many of the vaulted spaces and different Olympic stadiums, and it's very high quality and kind of wonderful material. Next slide. The second floor is a relatively small area. The tennis, obviously, court takes up 2 to 3 stories almost in volume. The tennis backcourt is a 2-story space, and then there's a relatively small area which is for these tennis activities, which includes racket, stringing and mending, and various and sundry things like that. A mechanical room, because we have to ventilate the space. We're not putting any mechanical equipment on the roof, and a storage area. And next slide. And I also want to point out we are proposing, in addition to the just the regular flat roof on the lower part of the building facing the street, to add a fabric structure. This would be a low flat fabric structure that you wouldn't see from the street over that 2-story backcourt area. In terms of the architecture of the building, it struck me that we've been submitted for 6 months, and we've had incredible conversations about parking and that strip along the street, but we haven't really had very many conversations about the architecture of the building. We're trying to put together what we think is a very elegant building. Stephen, next slide. Using basically 2 kinds of materials to express the 2 types of spaces and uses that are on the building. A brick, as Nick mentioned, at the front of the building for the supporting uses that's reminiscent of the Roland Garros, facility in France, and then the tension structure along with a striated fiberglass cladding for the tennis structure. And there's, I'm more than happy to talk about the reasoning on that. Next slide. So we put together some more 3D images of this that I thought might help a little bit. Laura mentioned that, someone has determined that this is a more industrial building. Obviously beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but that's not what we're trying to do. In fact, what we were hoping to do was a building that was somewhat timeless in a way that could either be a civic building, it could be an industrial building, it could be a commercial building. I mean, it was a building that, we thought made sense on this particular site and would be a good neighbor to any other uses that were here. I think the quality of the materials we're using certainly do not speak to what most people would think of an industrial building. We intend it to be very finely detailed, and we want to keep the architecture as simple as possible. In this view, by the way, we are proposing a solid gated area around the cars, but we kept it, which is something we can also talk about, but we kept it transparent so that you could actually see the building in these views. Stephen, could you just go through the next ones? This is the side. Right now, there would be parking for the motel that's right up against the property line on this side. We didn't model that. And then turn it to the next side. One of the things I think that was not mentioned, and I think this is an extremely important point, not only for our building, but other buildings that you're going to be evaluating in this area, is that many of the buildings here come right out to the property line. This is a fairly significant, warehouse type building that does come out to the property line. This drawing makes it look like our building comes out to the property line. It's actually set back somewhat right at that corner. But that's important, I think, when we have further discussion about treatment of the sidewalk along the along Palm, because if it does come into our property, it dead ends at the side of the adjacent building. And I think part of the guidelines that you have are not to do this to an individual property, but develop, a nice streetscape that extends all the way up and down whatever the street is that you're looking at. So anyway, also, can you go back to the front elevation, Stephen? I'm sorry to do that. Yeah. This is taken actually not at eye level. It's actually at mid-level, floor level. And the reason I'm pointing that out, those other shots were at eye level. I don't think along the street you're going to see the fabric structure, certainly not head-on. You will see it from the side because the property next to us is vacant. But I think that, unlike the straight-on elevations that make it look like that the arched roof is sort of in the foreground, it's actually quite a bit in the background. And I really do think that the brick, I'll call it the box, the brick, structure in the front will read on its own as a very, almost separate element. And, hopefully we intend to design it as very elegant, a building. And one thing I want to point out that may not have shown up in the drawings, and it wasn't mentioned in the previous presentation, is that we've actually included a garage door on the left-hand side. It's a roll-up garage door. We actually had this from day one in our submittal. It was not intended to be a garage door for cars. It was intended to be an open, way of bringing in natural, as a glass garage door, to bring in natural light, and also on a nice day to open it up and let some natural light. I mean, not natural light, but, air and ventilation. We just thought it was kind of a fun, nice feature. But as this discussion has, continued on parking, we actually have looked at schemes that we can do to provide additional parking for other uses, not for our use, because, we firmly believe that the uses that Nick is only require the 2 to 3 spaces. So I want to show you the next. Here's a couple.
I do want to be cognizant of time so that we all have time to provide our comments as well. So maybe if you could.
I can cut the next 60 seconds.
Thank
Steve,
you.
let's go through these quickly. It's just a fun drawing that kind of shows this from the roof looking down at the tennis facility. Next. So this is the current scheme we have. Okay. And we made one modification from what's in your packet, and that we slightly adjusted the bathroom on the first floor. And so right there, the wall that separates the turf area from the tennis backboard warm-up area will not be a structural wall. It will not be a shear wall or a bearing wall. Similar to the wall that separates the tennis from the tennis backboard area will also not be a structural wall in the sense it won't be a bearing wall. So we can't do penetrations. Next, and this will be the last slide. So we're actually able to, with that garage door, if somebody, some other use, or somebody determined that, they wanted to eventually, 10 years from now, buy this and put a spa in or something. There are many ways to locate parking in here. This particular one shows 5 spaces in the backboard warm-up area. That's a 2-story space. So if you put lifts in there, you probably get 10 spaces. And if you open up the wall that leads to the turf area, that all could be, additional parking. You could maybe get as many as 14 spaces in there in addition
I'm going to ask you to wrap up now so that we have time as well to provide comments.
Important to show that to you.
Yeah, actually, I really enjoyed your presentation and all the architectural details.
And I guess there is one last thing. We are not interested in pushing out to the street. And, we did that because we saw in some of the guidelines that there seemed to be some studies that were showing doing that. We went out and measured the sidewalk in front. We hand measured it. We believe it's closer to 11 feet. And we think within that 11 feet, we can, we know it doesn't meet the 13 foot that is in, or 13.6 in the specific guidelines that relate to this area. But we think within that 11 feet, we can really do a wonderful sidewalk planted area and not end up in a situation where when we get to our adjacent neighbor, it runs into the side of his building. And I'm sorry I talk so fast, but I wanted to get through.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your presentation. I appreciate all the detail. So we're going to move on to the Planning Commissioner's comments at this time. And who would like to start? Adam, do you want to start?
Through the chair.
Yeah.
Since we're running out of time, I would like to avoid conflicts with either the bicycle or the sidewalk plan developments. I would hate to encroach on those. I ride that street quite often on my bicycle, and it's not crowded. It is somewhat safe, but if we can even improve on it, I would not want to impede on it. Yeah, I don't have a lot of problems with the SUP, to be honest with you. I'd like to see the parking study and what the city's going to end up with, but I don't have a problem with meeting the code requirements. What I thought about for the parking was if you actually raised the backboard from the first floor to the second floor and left that portion of the building open, you could actually park there where you just showed your alternate parking behind the garage. The architectural design to me looks fine. I don't have a problem with it. And I'm glad you had mentioned the use for nonprofits. I had thought that could be a good benefit for the city. So I don't have huge problems with the way that this is presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your concise comments. Which planning commissioner would like to go next?
Through the vice chair, I will go just to keep
Great.
it quick and chop. So does this meet the intent of the general plan and zoning district? I would say it's close. It's not entirely, but I don't find it to be incompatible. It's not going to produce any revenue, but and maybe it's not actually the highest and best use for that property, but it is definitely better than a vacant property. So in that sense, I would, I'm okay with that. In terms of the building design and site plan, I think the building design is nice. It's not, it doesn't, I don't see anything wrong per se with the building design, although I do want to note that if you are considering, potentially making the option to someday add parking on the interior, shifting the garage door so that it actually would allow that to more towards the center of the building, it just as to give you more flexibility. It might be potentially wise. You never know what you want in the next 20 years. As far as adequate on-site parking and circulation, since this is a private court, I am feeling that the 3 spots seems to be right based on, that was what you've been told earlier on. The additional uses that are proposed do not seem to be something that is going to draw a lot of people, especially if this is purely a private use. I would like to see some sort of agreement or deed restriction if that is something that you want to maintain as far as the parking is concerned. However, we're also between 2 train stations and we need to reduce automobile use. And so I'm not going to push that too hard. However, one thing that I really do not want to flex on is the sidewalk width from our planning documents. I do not want to encroach into the street with the sidewalk, and I also want to make sure that we can accommodate the planned sidewalk width for that street based on our pedestrian master plan. And then finally, I would like to see, I see there's some trees proposed. I want to make sure that there are trees included in front of this. It is a rather dry looking street at the moment, and I would greatly appreciate some additional street trees as there are no overhead wires on that property. Those are my comments. Sidewalk, I do not want that going into the street, and I want to ensure that it maintains the pedestrian and bicycle master plan vision for that street in terms of width. All right, those are my comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Nugent. Commissioner Patel, could you provide any comments?
Sure. I wish we had a little more time to discuss, because I would have appreciated a little bit of discussion with the commission about the site use. So my first reaction looking at this project is that actually at the last general plan subcommittee meeting, Vice Chair Wolnick made a suggestion that I thought that was really smart, that the area between Palm and El Camino be designated mixed use residential instead of commercial, and sort of doing a swap in use between this area and Amflet Boulevard along the 101 in an effort to get our residential away from our heavily trafficked roadways, and just looking at how the rest of the area around Palm and El Camino is being developed into more like mixed use and residential uses, that this area of commercial felt a little bit out of place for this location. And so kind of keeping that potential future designation in mind, I think there's different ways to interpret the use of this project. We heard staff say that in some ways this is almost like a residential accessory use. And so I think a world in which this area converts to mixed use residential, this project could fit in as kind of a residential accessory use. But I don't have a strong sense one way or another, whether this is more commercial or whether this is more residential, and how to think about this project within that context of larger land use. My gut is telling me I think it could fit in with mixed use residential, and I think it's sufficiently close to commercial recreational that it could fit in with commercial as well. In terms of the building design and the site plan, I strongly agree with the other comments that I don't think that the project should take up any of the vehicular roadway. I think it's really important that we adhere to the bicycle master plan. I also bike down this area of Palm. My kids go to the music school just next door, and I'm very much looking forward to when there is a protected bike lane along, or a buffered bike lane along Palm. And in fact, I don't have concerns about the on-site parking, especially in a world where we're improving bicycle access. I would be fine if there was only 2 spots, as others have noted. If this is private use, there's only going to be 4 people max in this at a time. And so I would look into preserving the vehicular right of way and, eliminating that landscape buffer if needed in order to maintain the recommended sidewalk width. in terms of architectural design, I think it seems fine.
Okay, is that everything?
Yep, that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Patel. I have a few comments. Let's see. So in terms of the special use permit, I guess, yeah, similar to the others, I feel that it's close enough to meet that requirement that Laura talked about, that it needs to be, you know, so similar that it's, you know, very similar, I guess. So I guess it meets those requirements, and that would be acceptable to me. I do want to make a comment though about service commercial, or is it called service commercial businesses? So I actually have a friend who is a machinist that has a small business on a lot, probably about like this, and you know, he's not the owner of the lot. He just runs his business out of there. That is now going to be housing, which is great, but he is not going to be able to move his machine shop anywhere else. And I mean, he's probably going to retire, and that'll be the end of that. I don't know what's going to happen. But the point is, I really think that there is a place for service commercial, and that there are existing businesses. Fortunately, this is an empty lot. So as everyone said, you know, this project is certainly nicer and better than an empty lot that looks, you know, like not being used, and you know, the neighbors will appreciate the new building. So and I thought a lot about this service commercial with regards to the next meeting we have tonight, because that was something that I think is important in our community too. So that, to me, the special use permit seems it seems to meet the intent, and that seems to be acceptable. In terms of the site plan, I also think that encroaching into the street with the sidewalk doesn't seem like a good idea, and I really want to encourage the bicycle plan to be, you know, considered, because this is actually a big biking and pedestrian section of Palm, because people are going to the event center, or you know, parking nearby and going to the event center when there's things going on there. So, I mean, I've biked along there as well. So I think that, yeah, you know, not encroaching into that space to me is very important as well. And actually, I do think I mean, if it was, I would prefer to see 4 parking spaces there. I know that's a little bit of juggling. You'll have to reduce some of the space that's not part of the tennis court. I actually play tennis, and sometimes I bike to the courts in town, and other times I drive and I play doubles. So there's 4 of us and 4 cars. So it does seem like 4 spaces would make more sense to me. But if 3 was determined previously, I think that that's acceptable. And I do think that, yeah, the additional parking is obviously not necessary, because it's a single private tennis court. So that makes sense to me. Okay, I think I've covered everything except for the design. I really like the design a lot. I do think it's an elegant design. And as you said, it's a kind of a good neighbor to any of the buildings in the area. I really like these materials. I think it could be a really interesting building, so I'm looking forward to seeing it. Let's see if I have anything else. I think I covered it all. Hopefully that answers all the items. Those are my comments. With that, I think that this is a study session, so we do not need to take a formal vote. If there's no other comments, we can close this item. Is there any other comments from anyone?
Other than
Pardon me?
Other than we'd like to thank you for listening to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your presentations, and I think that closes your item.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone, for the feedback.
Good night.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. At this time, I think we can adjourn this meeting, right, and join the next one.
Yes, Vice Chair Williams, I just want to remind everybody to actually get off this meeting and join the other Zoom link. Thank you very much.
Through the chair, I have a question. Is there a way we can build in a little bit of a break between this meeting and the next one?
That was exactly my question too. Yeah, I don't know if you're asking me or Mary, but yeah, I think I would like to propose like 5 minutes.
Yeah,
break.
perfect.
That's fine.
Thank you.
We'll get it up and running, and you guys join us as soon as you can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.